Guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Picket Fence Studios. Today we are going to be using the craft beer lemonade, and I didn't show it for some reason, I don't know why, whiskey drink shaker dies, a nice cold one, which is the background stamp, and then the best mom and dad die. So this is my husband's and my father-in-law's Father's Day cards, which if you are a dad today, happy Father's Day. So I honestly didn't think about the second option until later. When I buy alcohol inks, I typically buy the fun colors. And I was like, I need like a amber brown color. How am I going to get that? And you'll see the second option later on. And maybe that will be an option for you. But in the meantime, I needed to make my own brown. So that is how I ended up kind of experimenting with custom colors. So in order to make brown, if you watch my videos and we talk about color theory, we talk about how we traditionally do not blend complementary colors because they will make brown. So a red and a green, a blue and an orange, a purple and a yellow. But depending upon which colors you use, you will get a different type of brown, a cool brown, a warm brown. So I started playing around with my complementary colors to try to create this brown. To each of them, I do want to tell you, I added a little bit of yellow since I knew that I was going to be looking for that kind of yellowish amber brown color. So I put down just regular alcohol ink. I didn't use the alcohol mixative. I just used regular alcohol, 90% isopropyl alcohol. And then I put down each color combination, a red with a green, a blue with an orange, and a purple with a yellow, to see which one I liked. And right away, the other two were too warm, so I knew I was going to be going with that blue-orange combination, and that's the one that's in the middle. So that was the one right out the gate. I was like, this is going to be the closest I'm going to be able to get to it. So when you're looking for a specific color that maybe you don't have, start looking at the color wheel and seeing what you can play around with. Like if you have a certain kind of pink that you're looking for, try messing around with your reds and purples. You know, if you have a certain yellow that you're looking for, try messing around with your reds and your oranges. And it, depending upon what kind of yellow it is, you could even mess around with the greens a little bit. But so here, I've settled on this orange and blue combination. So I am trying to get more of that into the center, enough of it that I will be able to use it behind my shaker to create my card. So I'm using the Tim Holtz little hand air blower here to kind of move things around. This was very wet. And so I moved my desk. Did you hear that loud boom? My apologies. I did end up blotting up some of the liquid of the parts that like I wasn't going to use, like the red, green, and the purple, yellow, because I didn't want to have to wait forever for it to dry. The other thing is, you'll notice as it's spreading to the top, the purple and the yellow, like that purple is, the undertone of it is really becoming quite visible. So if that's the color that you're going for, just make sure you watch the edges. So I created that one and then I set it aside. This is for my background right here. And again, I'm still trying to create that brown sort of amberish color. And so I went with a brushed corduroy and ground espresso. And then I'm also going to bring in fossilized amber to really brighten the whole thing up. Why did I need such a specific color? I'm so glad you asked. I would love to tell you. I was looking for it because I had actually made a completely different Father's Day card for my husband. And then I realized this is so silly, and I know that. But it wasn't on theme with what I bought him. So I did not want to give him that card. I wanted to give him a card that was on theme. So I still had to make my Father's Day card for my father-in-law anyway. So I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. This makes more sense to me. So I bought him for Father's Day, which he's already opened his gift. So it's safe to put the information out there. I bought him a man crate. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. You can pick all different kinds of ones like jerky or snacks or whatever, your significant other or dad or whatever, whoever the man in your life is, whatever they're into. But I chose the whiskey one, the whiskey appreciation one. And so I wanted his card to be on theme. So now here, this is the background on the left, and this is what my alcohol inks dried to. And it was too blue. It was too cool. So all I did was just add some more alcohol, and then I added some more of that yellow to kind of warm it up. Don't be afraid to play with these. And if you end up getting a color that you don't like, alcohol ink is very forgiving. If you end up getting a color that you don't like, if it's still wet, go ahead and sop up as much of it as you can. Then put down just regular alcohol and keep wiping. Your paper may be slightly stained, like your Yupo paper might be slightly stained, but you can start all over again. So here I've just put in more of the yellow to really warm it up, and I'm just moving that around. I know that it's going to be the background to my shaker, so it doesn't have to be perfect. This is it dry again, and you can see when I put it up next to my background, it's almost a spot on match. I think part of the reason why it looks so blue is because it's kind of bookended by those reds. So here's the second option. If you don't have alcohol inks or you don't want to blend a custom color, you may have something in your stash that you could use, which is alcohol marker refills. So I have Copic markers. I didn't even think about this until after the fact. I was like, I didn't even need to make my own color. I could have just used my Copics. And it's the same thing for the alcohol mixative or isopropyl alcohol. You can use the, what do they call it? The blender solution, what is that? Colorless blender. That's what it is. You can use the colorless blender. Now, I would recommend using alcohol if you have it, because it's much cheaper than replacing your colorless blender refill. But so for this one, I just chose brown. I mean, I obviously had brown refills. I have brown markers. So I chose a bright yellow, which was a Y08 at the top. And then I chose consecutively darker warm browns as it moved down the page, because I did still want color variation. And so I used the one that we made with the custom color alcohol ink for the beer, and I used this one for the whiskey glass. So both of them were totally usable. They matched pretty well. So don't feel like if you have one or the other, or there's somebody else who has, who is it? I can't remember. There's another company out there that has alcohol inks besides Ranger. So just use whatever you have that will make it work. For this background, if you have not seen these backgrounds before, I have used one of them from Picket Fence. They are, what do they call them? They're like endless backgrounds. Basically, the way that these work is they all fit into each other. So like when you stamp it, I treated it with my anti-static tool. I'm stamping it down with Versamark. Oh, something super important to note. This is the next day for me. If you're doing it without any breaks, you need to make sure that your ink blending is completely dry, because distress ink is made to emboss with. So if you try to stamp a pattern on there and emboss it, it's going to stick to the wet ink in the background. You have to completely dry the background, check it to make sure no embossing ink sticks to it, and then do your stamping and your embossing. But mine, I had waited overnight, so I knew it was dry. But anywho, I stamped it in the top left-hand corner, and now I'm going to heat emboss it in clear. And this is just to give an added interest. You will be able to see them, but not, I mean, it's a background paper. That's what I'm creating. It's like a background matte. So that is why I chose to do it in the clear. You could, stamp it in a color, like a brown or, whatever. Or you could even white heat emboss it. That would be pretty too. But I just went with the clear because I wasn't looking for it to compete with my focal point. I was looking for it to complement my focal point. But anywho, this never-ending background. So basically, the right-hand side where that stamping stops lines up with the left-hand side. And then the top and the bottom also line up. So you can just continuously stamp them for edge to edge stamping to create a big piece of pattern paper as you need. And in this case, I just need a, A2 size card, 4¼ by 5½. But these are really great if you're trying to, create a full background because they line up perfectly, really pretty easily. And then, what is the other one? The watermelon one, I think, is the one that I used previously, and I created a shaker card with it. If I will try to remember to link that at the end. But anyway, these are great. And so this one has like a bunch of different bottles, and really it's just for like the ambiance of it. So I went ahead and stamped it. This is the last one. It's just this one little corner that I had to line up and then heat emboss. And then this part will be done. And then we'll just set it aside and start to work on creating our shakers, which the craft beer die will be more of a traditional shaker. The whiskey glass is a standalone shaker. So for the craft beer, I am cutting the main beer mug out of a white piece of cardstock. This is going to be the front of my card. And I did just want to tell you, you want to save that piece that pops out of where the handle is. And then for the center die, I'm actually going to cut mine out of vellum. So that I can add it over top of it as kind of like a frosty little accent. So I'm going to cut that out of vellum as well. This is the whiskey drink shaker, and I'm going to modify this one because I want to, in the whiskey appreciation crate that I bought him, had personalized rocks glasses. So that's what I wanted. I wanted a rocks glass. So in order to do that, I'm going to take like the first 2/3 of the die and put that onto my cardstock. So that way I can create a glass that is a little bit shorter. In order to run this through my die cut, I'm going to do partial die cutting. So you just put it in like normal, except you put your top cutting plate where it does not cut through the entirety of it. So I have it lined up about 1/4 of an inch up from where the die is. Where that plate is where the pressure is. So if there is no pressure on the rest of the die, it will not cut. So in order to finish, I'll show you here. There's no cut at the bottom. Right, we've stopped it right there and we've changed the size of the glass. I did do this a couple of times because I wasn't sure how tall I was going to need my glass or if I was going to need more than one. I wasn't really sure of my design at this point. So I'm going to go ahead. My Fiskars trimmer has a wire guide inside, so I can line up that wire guide with the parts that are already cut. And then here, I'm going to cut it once to get a straight edge, a flat bottom. And then I will go back in, and I apologize that it's kind of off screen. But basically, I'm going to take that little blade, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the sides. I'm going to line it up in what's already cut. And then I'm going to pull it down and stop at the next cut line. And then that way it will cut the center out, but leave me with the bottom. So it's going to leave me with a frame that I will then be able to turn into this rocks glass shaker, where I trimmed it where it was, for it to be flat. It was a little hairy. For my ice cubes, which come from the lemonade shaker, I am doing a very, very thin coat of the sea glass paper glaze, and this dries shiny, and so I'm doing a very thin coat on a piece of vellum, and it does like warp the paper a little bit, but it's okay because I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine, and that will mostly flatten it back out. It will definitely flat out the ice cubes that I'm going to cut out of it. So, and this dries really, really quickly. As it dries, it did crinkle up a little bit more, but nothing that was overly concerning. Because I can't not color, I didn't want to leave my glass with no shading at all. So I chose to do a little bit of blue. And I went in first with the B01, or I'm sorry, the B00. And it wasn't quite dark enough, so I'm going back in with a B01 a 01, yes. So the B00 was too light. I went back in with the B01, then blended it out with the B00, and then lastly, it's a B quadruple 0. And it's just to get some shading on the bottom. And I did create, like I said, I cut out 3 of them because I wasn't sure of my design yet. To stick this to my acetate, I oftentimes use, well, almost always use liquid adhesive, but sometimes it is better to use dry adhesive. And if you're sticking something to acetate or to Yupo paper, I have picked up that it is much better to use a dry adhesive. So I'm just using some tear tape to do that. And then I'll go in and remove that release paper. I have my piece of acetate sitting there to the right. And so I'm just going to stick it right down onto my acetate, and then using my scissors, I will trim around this so that it matches up to that kind of creative size die that we made ourselves. And then that will be a standalone shaker. Now that my sea glass paper glaze is dry on my vellum, I'm going to use the ice cubes from the lemonade shaker and cut out several of these. These are going to go into my little rocks glass. You can see them up there. And then this is the craft beer shaker. In order to adhere my acetate, I'm using that same kind of tear tape, and then removing, the release paper, and I'll put the acetate down right over top of that so that it sticks really nicely and it's not going to go anywhere. So I do like to try to make sure that I get all like the dust particles or anything off of my acetate before I adhere it. So now with both of those in place, I'm going to work on creating the shakers portion. So this piece that you see at the bottom is the piece that we did with the Copic refills, with the marker refills. And this is the back drop for my little whiskey glass. So I'm putting glue on my ice cubes, and I'm just doing kind of like the 4 corners. Any adhesive that you put on the back of vellum, at least in my experience, you're going to be able to see at least part of the adhesive, but you have to remember this is part of a shaker. So there's lots of things that will be going on inside the shaker that I don't think anybody is going to notice my little dabs of glue. And I needed to put ice cubes in my drink because nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, I guess. There are some people who maybe drink warm liquor, but I don't know any of them. Not that I'm well versed on the subject. I'm not much of a drinker, but I would not deny my husband is definitely a person who appreciated his whiskey appreciation crate. And it came with this, it was really cute actually. It's a crate, it's a real crate, and it comes with like a mini crowbar, so they have to kind of like pry their way into the box, which I think he may have liked just as much, if not more, than the actual gift, because all boys are just grown children and they like to just break into things. So he really did appreciate his. So now that I have my ice cubes glued down, I am just holding this in place and trimming around it so that I can get the correct shape. Nobody is going to see the back of it, so I am not worried if the cutting is a little bit wonky. It's going to go on the card and nobody is ever going to see it. But I do think it came out super cute. I can't wait to put the little shaker bits in it. For this one, because the craft beer is a traditional shaker, meaning it's the shaker shape is the full card, we are going to put down foam tape just like you would with a traditional shaker. The only thing of note is if you have Picket Fence's extra large foam tape, theirs is made much thicker. So whereas like with other types of foam tape, you have to put down 2 layers to create a shaker, with theirs you do not. You only need 1 layer. And also you want to make sure that your foam tape is going edge to edge, so that way none of your little shaker bits fall out. Like they need to be butted right up against each other. And it's going to be the same thing here, even though the rocks glass is in itself an individual shaker, like it stands on its own as an individual shaker. All of those edges still need to be sealed up with foam tape, or I will lose my my bits that I'm filling. Speaking of my bits I'm filling with, I am using Dad's Mix, ice cubes, the Sands of Time rhinestones, and is it All About the Yellow? Is that what the other one's called? I think it might be called All About the Yellow. But anywho, I'm using a little bit of each of them. Obviously, much less for my rocks glass as it is smaller, and then much more for the craft beer die because it's very large and it's the full card. So I just picked out of each one kind of what I wanted, which was like those darker browns, medium browns, some yellows. And I did not put I do want to note that I did not put the ice cube ones in the beer. I just put it in the rocks glass. So then once you have all of your shaker bits in there are some people who remove their adhesive before they do their shaker bits. I didn't have an issue, but if that's something that you have a problem with, like spilling your bits out, trying to get the release paper off, then pull the release paper before you put your sequins or rhinestones or whatever in. Then once the release paper is off, I just put the backer on kind of like a lid, and there is our shaker. It's got all our little shaker bits in it. It's our little rocks glass. For the beer, I'm going to do the same thing, release all that paper, and then I'm going to put the background. This is the one that we custom colored with the alcohol ink. I trimmed it down to be the size slightly smaller than an A2 size card, and then that is going to be the backer for this one. You remember I told you to keep that little piece. We're going to then adhere that to the acetate to keep our mug shape. And then the vellum portion, again, I know I'm going to be able to see my adhesive. However, I also know that for this one, my sentiment is going to go right across the middle, so you won't really be able to see the adhesive. I'm cutting the Dad out of navy blue and the Best out of gold. These cards kind of matched each other. And as you can see, I'm still cheap, y'all. I'm still a cheap chicken. See how I'm using my leftovers from my die cuts to use as my mat, because nobody's going to see that. So I don't care. I'm using my scraps where I can. So I mounted a piece of white onto a piece of navy. There's just like 1/8 of an inch mat on that. And then I didn't want to leave my shaker glass kind of floating in the air. So I did cut a piece of dark brown at an angle, and I'm going to put my little rocks glass on that. That's going to ground it. And then my sentiment will be to the left-hand side. When I'm adhering the sentiment here, I'm starting with the 2 letters on either side because there's a stopping point, like this mat stops. So I need it to be centered on this mat. So doing the first letter and the last letter allows me to center the A in between them. And then I will add the Best in the top left-hand corner. Can I tell y'all how I struggled? I struggled trying to figure out the layout that worked best for this, because in my mind, I kept insisting that it be a portrait card. And finally, after a whole day of working on it and a whole night's sleep, when I came back to it the next morning, I was like, just flip it into landscape, Kelly. So if you're struggling with the elements that you have for a card, that you love all the elements, but they're just not coming together, just try flipping it around, because that's all it took for me. And then even I was talking to a crafty friend, and she and I were like trying to work out how it should go. And the next morning I was like, girl, I finished this card. You're never going to believe what I did to finish it. And she was like, you flipped it, didn't you? And I was like, yeah. She's like, I totally didn't think of that yesterday, but the moment that you said it, it made so much sense. Just flip it. Yep. So does that mean my beer bottles for my background are going left to right instead of up and down? Yes. Could I have redone another one? Absolutely. Do I think my husband will notice that my bottles are going in the wrong direction? No, I don't. So I just embraced it because that background was already done. And you guys know how I feel about redoing things. So the gold, I think, is a really nice accent. The Best is done in a really fine script, which I love. It, contrasts that Dad so well. And so I just felt like it was a really good way to just bring in a little bit of extra shine. For the little brown piece, that's acting as my grounding agent, I did have to use just a slightly lower profile foam tape so that everything would be even. I didn't want to I put foam tape behind the whole thing because my shaker's already pretty thick, right? Because it's standing by itself. But I still have like another 2 layers of cardstock. So I just wanted it to be flush with that top layer, with that white layer. And I'll just turn it over and trim that part off. And then that card is nearly done. We just have a little bit of accents. So see on this blue one over here, how I cut my dad out of the back of it. And now I'm going to use it as my backer piece. Yeah, you save where you can, folks. No judgment here. So this one is, again, another 1/8 of an inch. It is a little bit harder to see this one because the top of the card is so popped up with all of that foam tape, but it is there, and I think you can see it in the pictures. So this one, when I'm adhering the dad, instead of adhering the last letter first and the last letter on either side, this one, because I want it to be centered in my card, I'm actually going to start with the middle letter, because I'm trying to center it on this craft beer. So I am going to put down the A first, and then that will allow me to figure out how much room I need to the left and right to put down the D's. So that's just a little helpful trick when you're trying to spell things out. Another thing is, if you have a hard time getting them perfectly straight, which I think we all struggle with from time to time, you can intentionally put them down wonky. And if you do it intentionally, then it's not anything that gives anybody any pause. So the best in the gold went right over top of that one, over that dad, since it's a center focal point. And then for this one over here, I did have a little bit of open space, so I used some gems from the Sands of Time to fill that in. And then I used a clear glitter pen to just go around the edge of the drink. And then that is it for both cards, except for me shaking them, because who can resist shaking a shaker? I do it when I take pictures too. So these were super fun to make. I hope it gives you some ideas on how you can find colors even if you don't own them. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.